Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Voices of Music Therapy podcast. I'm your host, Brian Locascio, and today's episode is going to be a little different. I wanted to take the time to sit down and reflect because as of August 10th, which was Tuesday this week, I marked 1 year of being a professional music therapist, practicing, working for an organization, and I have so many thoughts and feelings. And I thought this would be a really great platform to bring to the awareness of others some things that might be going through the heads of first-year practitioners, or maybe in case you all just want to hear from my experience as well. I thought this would be a great opportunity to share my thoughts and feelings. With that being said, let's go ahead and dive in. So I've written down questions that I want to do and speak on every single year. And as I grow as a music therapist, I believe my questions will change a little bit and maybe my answers will change, but really keeping the same structure so that we can see and how I can see I grow throughout the years. So the very first question is, how is coming into the profession during COVID-19? This is one of those questions that is definitely going to be a little bit more time sensitive, hopefully. So I think the biggest thing to reflect on regarding COVID for me, as well as many people who are transitioning out of internship into the profession, was that finding a job was super hard, not just for music therapists, for people of all professions. Many people were laid off. Among the health detriment that happened to this country, there was also a significant job loss. And looking for music therapy jobs was very, very hard. I remember only 3 or 4 being open. And when I applied, it was that classic, you need 2 years of experience. And those restrictions were heightened due to COVID, being that they wanted people who are a little bit more experienced so that they don't have to do the additional training on top of the emotional and staff energy that they are already putting in. And I think that was really, really hard for me, being someone who was so excited to see all the opportunities that were in the US and in the world for music therapy, and coming into the profession with limited options as far as job opportunities, although I was very, very lucky to find a job that I love. But coming into the profession with that limitation definitely started on a anxious note for me. So that was something to think on as well. The second question is, what is something I wish I would have known in undergrad? And gosh, I wanted to keep my responses candid to these, so I actually didn't think them out ahead of time. So I would say something that I wish I would have known in undergrad was that you really have to initiate advocacy for yourself. We talk about advocacy for the profession and explaining what music therapy is appropriately. We talk about advocacy for our populations that we work with, those who are the most vulnerable, and speaking up for them. But I think a lot of times we lose advocacy for ourselves, and being positive and having the confidence to say, like, yes, I may be new at this, but at the same time, I know what I'm doing. I went to school for 4 years. I got a 6-month internship, 7-month, whatever it is, 1,200 plus hours. That is something that was a standard that you passed in order to be in this profession. And obviously, you should be open to learning. You don't know everything. Not at all saying that. However, I do think you should be confident in what you do know. And I think you should be able to show that to other people, because I think that was one of the hard things for me, was just assuming that people knew my value and in any context within music therapy. But I think if you show them your value, then it becomes more significant. You have to put yourself in a position where others will see you as an equal or as somebody worth listening to. And I think one of the big examples is being active in those conversations that are really, really hard. I'm talking like socio-economic, all these different types of discussions, gender, sexuality, race, just every identity that I've talked about in other episodes, being able to have those conversations and admit that you're wrong. But the fact that you're trying to have those conversations really makes a significant difference in your advocacy for yourself, because others will see that you want to learn. And that is something that's going to make you go far in this profession, at least from what I've heard from other people who have been veterans in the field. All right, next question. What is something I was surprised to learn in my first year? Something I was surprised to learn in my first year is that not everyone charges for music therapy even remotely the same. Like, I thought there'd be some consistency, knowing that there would be differences. One of the big things I would say that I learned is that you should definitely ask if you get paid for administrative work as well as direct service. And if they're paid the same, what amount of time is allocated towards both of those things? That's a question that I wouldn't have even thought of prior. I would have just assumed it was about the same 50-50. However, not all businesses and companies and large corporations follow this rule. And I wish I would have also known that there's quite a few differences between like private practice versus big organization, especially regarding projects that you want to pursue, who you have to talk to pursue those projects, and financial ability to pursue those projects as well. So it's something to keep in mind for those who are entering the field, who are just starting in the field with the first 1 or 3 years, or those who are students. Something to think about that I definitely learned a lot from. I remember writing this one down. What was my proudest moment in my first year of practice? Oh, goodness. I think my proudest moment, for those of you who don't know, I work with a variety of populations, one of which is pediatric hospice. And I think one of my proudest moments was creating a legacy project of an entire album of songs that were written by one of my clients, and to see their face light up when they realized like they were capable of doing anything they wanted. And in this case, it was creating an album, making music, was one of the most rewarding things I've ever experienced. I was humbled. I learned so much more from this client than he learned from me. And it was just incredible getting to collaborate with the family, getting to work on the album artwork and the solo track artwork as well. Ultimately, it was something that I will never forget and I am forever grateful for. So that was definitely my proudest moment. And on the contrary to that, or in a contrasting way, what was the lowest moment? And I would say my lowest moment was when I made a mistake and I overthought it and I let it take over my mind for just a little bit. But that'll lead me into some things that we will discuss later on this episode. But yes, mistakes happen. They will happen to you no matter what. You could be perfect in every single way, but humans are not meant to be perfect all the time. They're not meant to be perfect. And so you can mess up and you will mess up. And it's just really important how you come out of that. So that was one of my lowest moments, but I came out of it learning a lot. And because of that, I am so much better of a music therapist. And I'm just so excited to see everything that this career will be for me. So yes, little mistakes, don't let them go to your head. Just go ahead and move on and learn from it. Where do you find your interest headed towards? I love this question because I'm excited to see how it changes over time. But right now I have a lot of interest towards autistic people and music therapy and working with those who have autism or on the spectrum and learning how the language changes as time progresses. So yeah, I've learned a little bit about DIR floor time, as I've discussed, and different methods for working with neurodiverse populations. And I'm really excited to keep exploring that and see where it takes me. In addition to that, I would say that my interests are outside of music therapy as well. So one of my big interests is writing. I've always really enjoyed writing, whether music, whether poetry, whether ideas for stories and plays and movies. And so I'm excited to explore that. That's an interest for me right now. And then especially not music therapy related, I am really interested in surfing. San Diego is a pretty great place to do that, as well as rock climbing and soccer. I've been pretty active in soccer right now, so that is where my interests are headed in the moment. And what are your thoughts on the status of our professional organization? That's a really big question. I don't know why I wrote that down. I am going to give you a political answer that's honest as well. And I will say that no organization, especially one that represents such a diverse group of people, is going to be perfect. There's no way it can be perfect. And that is the first statement I want to say. Second, I want to say that I, as a new professional, am a little bit disappointed to see that some of the leadership that has been chosen before and is no longer in leadership doesn't acknowledge that beautiful diversity and fight for equity within our profession. There are just some basic things that I think we need to all sit down and discuss somehow, maybe at a national conference. But I think there needs to be a clear way of communication between our organization and the people that it represents. And that's not me saying I know how to do that. However, I know that there are plenty of people who are very, very capable of streamlining that process. And I am excited for the transition, to see the flow between new leadership and the wisdom passed down from old leadership. And yeah, I don't know. I'm excited. I think that COVID and the Black Lives Matter movement and all these various social issues have brought up a lot of important discussion that's been on the back burner. And now that we've had time to stay at home and kind of reflect, it's coming to the forefront. And yeah, I just think we're going to come out of this really strong. And maybe that's the optimist in me, but that's where I see it headed. How do you see yourself fitting into the profession? Currently, I see myself fitting in as a pediatric music therapist primarily, but I am super happy that I'm getting to dabble in a little bit of mental health, especially with teens, which is technically still pediatrics, but teens and young adults. So I really enjoy that. And that's kind of where I see myself fitting in professionally, as well as this podcast, getting to feature the incredible wisdom and make the wisdom equitable and accessible to all of you. And then I also kind of want to join a professional organization, whether that is my regional board or maybe even my local representation for San Diego. I don't know. But I think that would be really cool, so that the change that I'm talking about is something that I could play an active role in. That's kind of how I see myself fitting into the profession right now. I don't think I could even guess how it's going to be next year or in 2 years or 3 years. So this will be a fun one to reflect on. What do you hope for the profession in the years to come? I kind of said that one already. I just really want us to be more accessible, and I want our standards of practice to be more consistent among training. On paper, they're consistent, but the different levels of experience that come out, at least what I've seen from watching various interns and watching various students, we all just come from very different backgrounds and experiences. And so, although I definitely don't think music therapy should be approached one way, I do think that the expectations for musicianship, for therapeutic processing skills, things like that could be a little bit more consistent. And that's where I think it's going to be headed towards, as well as making, cheaper classes or things like that. Whether that's 50 years down the line or not, I don't know, but that's what I'm hoping for. Who did you look up to the most this year? I would say that the person that I looked up to the most, okay, this is where it's going to get cheesy, but I would say it was my mom, because she doesn't really know about music therapy, or at least didn't prior to me going into the profession. However, she's been very helpful with any type of business decision I've had to make. She's been helpful with any type of processing that I needed to do, obviously being HIPAA compliant and everything like that. But she's just been a really great resource and support. And although I have so many educational resources and people that I have appreciated so much this year, I do feel like it is also important to give credit where credit is due. And sometimes the most that I can learn about music therapy is from people outside of the profession. And I learned so much from her. So I would definitely say that she is the person that I learned or looked up to the most this year. And where do I go from here? I have some ideas in the works for you all. I have many projects. As you probably heard through several episodes, I always have like 8 projects running. Nobody really knows about them, only my close group of friends, but everybody who knows me knows that I'm constantly running around and doing a variety of things. And a lot of those are exciting projects for you all. I think a lot more CMTEs are going to be rolling out. I think that a lot of children's resources are going to be coming out from me, as well as, I think some music, some non-music therapy, just songwriting music is something that is going to come out and go from here. And I think that both Alec, the editor, and I, the host, are going to focus on continuing to give you content from a variety of sources and giving you top quality content as well. So that's where we're going from here. I'm just going to take everything one day and step at a time, because planning to some degree is very helpful, but you never know what's going to happen. So I'm kind of just taking one foot after the other. As per our usual tradition, I've said it many times that this show is not about featuring only my voice. It is really about showcasing the voices of others. I'm merely a facilitator. And so I did a little bit of a survey and sent out questions to many of my colleagues who are wrapping up or have already wrapped up their first year of practice in the profession. And I asked them what is one thing they've learned. So I want you to hear from them, and then we will talk about each one of their comments. So the first one is by Cassidy Besse.
In my first year of practicing as a music therapist, I learned the importance of developing a refined self-awareness in order to protect my energy, spirit, and passion as a way of caring for myself and as a way of being a better, more present, and more resilient music therapist for the patients and families I work with.
And what a great first quote to kick us off. I mean, self-awareness is so important, and you think you know it when you have these supervisors. However, when you're out there in the field alone, you have to constantly be aware of how things affect you. One thing that you may not think was a big deal may come up a month later. So it's really important to acknowledge those feelings that you have and really let them sit. And that's something that we tell our clients all the time, right? But allowing yourself to actually process everything that happened is crucial, because in this profession where we are constantly giving, both musically, emotionally, mentally, physically, and in every way, it is so easy to get wrapped up in client to client to client to client, and then totally lose your sense of self and how you're feeling, especially the busier you get. And I know Cassidy is very wise in saying that she developed this self-awareness that is ultimately going to help her continue in the profession and have that longevity of the career. And I want you all to really think about how your experiences are affecting you on the daily. It's easy to overthink it, but really just take your time to let the feelings flow in and sit. If you went through a rough session, you may need to take 5 to 10 minutes afterwards to process it. You may want to go to your colleagues. You may want to go to a professor. You may want to go to a family member. Whatever and whoever it is, take the time to do it, because this profession is hard and it's so rewarding, but you need to be able to sit back and reflect. And I think that she just did a really great job of saying that. Now, one thing that you get, and I mentioned a little bit, is this feedback constantly, whether you're in internship or you're in practicums as a student. And another type of reflection is that professional reflection. So I encourage you all now, if you are still studying and not yet a professional, to go ahead and engage in giving yourself some feedback. Think about what you did right, what you did wrong. But the key that I found really useful for me is pretending like I'm looking at it from a third perspective after the session. So I'll imagine that I'm a supervisor. I'm not going to judge myself in the way that I judge myself, but I'm going to try and judge myself based on what I think somebody else would say. And that's really a good way to kind of work out those cognitive distortions that you may have towards your own practice, or like any type of self-doubt. Thinking of it from an outside perspective has been really beneficial for me, at least, to look at what I could have done better and thinking, okay, maybe like I didn't lead that song poorly. Maybe the way that I led it could have been structured differently for this group. So it's not always obvious. Maybe it's that they're tired and you did everything you could. But really take some time to practice that reflection. And for those of you who are already in the field, amazing chance to start that if you aren't already doing it. But I think many of us know the importance of that self-feedback, because you're not always going to get professional feedback and observations from your facilities. And that's very important. So I would engage in that self-reflection now rather than later. And you also have to seek out opportunities to keep learning as well. So speaking on really giving yourself that self-awareness, what do you know and what you don't you know? And you know you're headed in the right direction when you realize, I don't know a lot, like most things. And that's when you start to grow. Because if you think that you know every single thing about any population, any diagnosis, and I'm speaking to myself as well, you are not correct. You're wrong. Like, you got to rework it. You could be a professional and leader in the field. And I can tell you what, in 20 years, everything that you know is probably going to be different. So always take that time to realize what you don't know and then seek out those opportunities, whether that's through networking, Facebook groups, going on to discussions that happen on Zoom or conferences. Engaged in those discussions, and they don't even have to be music therapy. So many transfers can be made from other professions and other creative arts professions, but also just any job in general. It's wild how many lessons I've learned from things that were not music therapy related directly, but the transfers that you can make are very valuable. So in anything that you do, seek out opportunities to keep learning. I would recommend that. That is something that I keep trying to do. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but I found it really, really useful. And that's why connections are everything. And that's how you can make connections, is through seeking out those opportunities. Be aware of who you know, how you know them, what their specialties are. Is it something that you need more people who have your specialty so that you can collaborate with, or do you need more people from a variety of perspectives? Something to reflect on. Now, Cassidy was our first guest that we sampled and got to hear from, and our second guest is Hannah DePriest. So let's take some time to hear what she has to say about her first year in practice.
I think the biggest thing that I've learned in my first year as a music therapist is that you have to go in there with complete and utter confidence that it's going to be the best thing that you're ever going to do, and just be ready to adapt at a moment's notice. I mean, as much as school wants to prepare us for the real world, you really aren't going to ever get that experience until you're out there without a safety net, without a teacher or a partner standing next to you as you're running an entire complete session, because it is just all on you.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Hannah really captured this idea that fake it till you make it. You have to go in with confidence, because your clients know if you're unconfident, then they're going to be less likely to engage. If you're less confident, you're going to spend extra time that's not necessary planning excessively and then rewriting those plans. And it's so easy not to be confident, but you got to fake it till you make it. That is something that I have learned time and time again in my first year of practice. Imposter syndrome is real. That's why we had Emily on the show early on, was because this is something that is seen in many helping professions and is being seen more and more, or rather being acknowledged more and more. But that confidence to just go in and give it your all. Do the best you can do. And if it doesn't work out, then you can still walk away saying, I did everything I could. And as time passes, I've learned to sit with that and be confident and comfortable with that. And if there was anything that I could have done better, that's where that self-reflection comes in. That's where peer supervision comes in, whether that is through your organization or outside in additional groups that you are a part of. But confidence is key, and adapting is so important. I think we all know that, whether student, intern, professional, new professional, veteran, professional. I think we're all very, very aware that adapting is key. And as much as we might like our atypical, session plan, hello song, intervention 1, intervention 2, rest, getting that nice roller coaster of the bell curve throughout the session, you're going to get curveballs. It'll happen. You can't control any situation. I think we all know that. And so you just have to be ready to adapt. And it's easier said than done. But I think in my first year, I've been forced to adapt to so many things that eventually it just starts to flow and it feels very natural. And I hope that you all have that same feeling and echo it. If not, go ahead and leave a comment. I'd love to hear ways that you've adapted, or ways that you didn't really know what to do or how to adapt. And maybe we can brainstorm and work it out together. So feel free to do that as well in the show notes. So that was hearing from Hannah DePriest, one of my colleagues. Actually, these are all colleagues that I've had and worked with in either a research capacity or in university or in different populations. It's just been a pleasure. So this next guest that we have the pleasure of hearing from is Elizabeth VanSant. So let's hear from her wisdom that she got from her first year of practice.
The biggest mistake I made in my first year of work was saying yes to every opportunity that was presented to me. In doing so, I quickly overextended myself and was on the fast track to burnout. Just remember, no is a full sentence and doesn't require any explanation.
I just really want that last sentence to sink in for us. So let's hear it one more time.
No is a full sentence and doesn't require any explanation.
No is a full sentence and doesn't require any explanation. I think that for a lot of us in our first year, we come in with these doe eyes and are so excited to make a difference. We're like, we are going to be the change for the world. We are single-handedly going to make music therapy come up on the map and change everyone's ideas of what it is and be incredible and never make a mistake. And in order to do that, I have to say yes to every single thing people ask of me, because that way I will be the best music therapist or the best person or clinician that I can be. And I don't think that's quite how it worked, at least not for me. Elizabeth spoke it so true when she said that saying yes to every opportunity is easily going to burn you out. There will be times when you'll be asked to work weekends. There will be times when others ask you to present with them at conferences. There will be times when people ask you to do their surveys. As you grow your network of people, the requests will grow as well. And, friendships get harder outside of college and university. Now it's long distance for a lot of people. For some people it's not, but instead then they have to deal with like family dynamics. And so saying yes to everyone and people pleasing is super easy for us as people in helping professions who are empathizers and constantly want to give our all. However, maybe some of that all needs to be given to ourselves. And sometimes that is saying no. And you really have to leverage and think about what you want. If you're happy in the moment that you're in. If not, is it temporary or is it situational and something that you need to change? But saying no is so important and something that I personally struggle with a ton. But the times that I have said no, when I knew that I would not like doing those things, have been phrases and sentences that I've never regretted. So don't be afraid to say no. You don't need to say why. Just say that is not something I'm interested in this time. It's a no from me, as the zillennials might say, or something like that. But no is very important, and it doesn't just have to be in music therapy. The next guest that we are going to hear from is somebody who has been in the profession for a little bit over a year. But I find the advice that they give to be very crucial and something that's very important to hear. So there's two parts to this. I will play the first clip and then play the second clip. Without further ado, this is the first year reflection by Juliana Hsu.
One of the most important things I learned during my first year as a music therapist is the importance of time management. As a student, you're used to seeing maybe a couple clients a week to all of a sudden having anywhere from 30 to 40 clients a week. So just making color coordinated schedules for yourself, setting aside time for session prep, documentation, and just laying out clear boundaries and deadlines for yourself.
And of course, setting those deadlines and color coding is easier said than done, but that is so crucial and important. Time management. That has to do with what Elizabeth VanSant said earlier, where she mentioned saying yes and no. Same exact thing here. Once you say yes, how are you going to prioritize what's most important to you? What are you going to spend more time towards, and what can be on the back burner, or what's something that you can push off a month? It might be more fun to record that single that you're super excited about. However, if you have a deadline for a podcast episode that comes out the coming Friday and it's a Wednesday, you may have to reallocate that time, and you may have to schedule so that you can do them both on a timeline that makes you happy. But time management is super important, especially with clients. If you work for a private practice and have to commute and do home care, you have to be able to estimate how much time it's going to be to drive to that client, in addition to sanitizing your instruments, in addition to potential traffic, what time of day it is, in addition to planning a lunch or being able to be back in time for a virtual session. So yeah, time management is super important. Go ahead and practice it in college. Go ahead and practice it in the professional world, because it is something that does not just have to do with work. It is something that you're going to have to manage and deal with your entire life, and is something that is crucial to becoming an effective and innovative music therapist. So that was the first quote by Juliana Hsu. This second one is one that I enjoyed hearing. I know those who are coming into the profession or who have been in the profession for a year will enjoy hearing. Those who are veterans will echo it. So here's that second quote.
Be patient with yourself and to never be afraid to ask for help. So whether that is with your professors, your colleagues, your friends who are also music therapists, everyone in the music therapy community is extremely kind and always willing to help.
Yes, from my experience, nobody has ever turned me down flat and said, I don't have time for this, or has said, that's a dumb question. Even if it's a question that a lot of people know the answer to, it's still an important question. And so don't be afraid to ask those questions that you feel like everybody else in the room already knows the answer to, because more often than not, it'll be the same question everybody else is wondering, but nobody spoke up and asked. And that is a big lesson that I've learned in my first year practice as well, is to ask the questions that might be obvious to other people, because as soon as I get the answer, it'll be obvious to me too. And asking for help can be hard, especially when you don't know what the help might look like. But speaking a little bit to what I said earlier, look at those colleagues that have supported you. Look at those professors, as Juliana said, that have provided support for you throughout your career, because the odds are they'll want to remain in contact. And so utilize those people, and college isn't the end all be all for those relationships. It can be, but it can also be the start of a beautiful professional relationship where you can collaborate with each other. And so I think reaching out for help helps us all to grow. It gives us a direction sometimes. And it's also realistic to say, hey, I don't know everything about this topic, and I know that you've had plenty of experience. Why don't you talk to me a little bit about your experiences over Zoom or over a coffee or something like that? So asking for help is super important and something that you should never be afraid to do. And if you get a negative response, maybe that's not from you asking for help. Maybe that's from the person having their own stigma about asking for help. In regards to the different organizations she was talking about, yes, there is a music therapy group for queer people. There is an affinity group as well as a support group for allies and things like that. And when working with queer clients, there's ones for working with deaf clients. There's ones working with mental health and with incarcerated adults, with those who are in transitional housing. There's literally a music therapy group for everything, usually on Facebook, but on a variety of platforms. So I would encourage you all to check out your social media to see what types of resources you have and that you can reach out to, because a lot of times they have free meetings too online, and they'll also survey everybody to ask when they're available. And yeah, one of the coolest groups that I've been able to ask for help from and learn from is the Music Therapy Podcast Collective. And I do want to take a couple moments before we say goodbye today to talk about them. But the Music Therapy Podcast Collective is a group of music therapy podcasters who got together and said, hey, we want to provide resources for you all. You already listened to our podcast. Why don't we make it an opportunity for you all to get CMTEs? So by the amazing work of a variety of podcasters, we have been able to put this together and provide actual CMTEs for you. So you can go to mtpodcastcollective.com and check it out. Voices of Music Therapy does have a packet or a booklet that you can buy and get CMTEs for regarding identity. But there are so many fantastic other music therapy CMTs that are available. And I just encourage you to scroll through and check it out. I've learned a lot from everybody in charge and having important discussions. And there's also recorded meetings that you can go to and learn from the authors who made and created the CMTEs. And yeah, it's just a really, really cool resource and something that I would have liked and am glad to have in my first year of practice. That being said, we have come to the end of today's episode. It's a little bit shorter, but I hope you all found value in this. It's something that I'm excited to reflect on each year, asking these questions, getting to hear from my colleagues, whether they're in their first year, second year, or maybe we'll be in our 17th year, and hearing how our brains develop and change and where our interests lie. And yeah, it's the beginning of a really, really cool time capsule almost. And I'm so honored and thankful that you all have joined me on this journey so far. And I hope that you grow along with me and choose to continue listening and be a part of this little family we started. So without any more hesitation or emotional stuff, don't forget to rate our podcast on Apple Music and listen to our playlist listed in the bio. Subscribe to hear new episodes every other Friday, and thank you for listening. If you would like to recommend a guest or engage more with us, you can email us at voicesofmusictherapy@gmail.com or follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Don't forget to comment. I love responding to your comments at Voices of Music Therapy. So thank you all for listening, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day, and I look forward to learning more with you in the future. If you'd like to see today's guest or learn more about the show, check us out on Facebook or Instagram at Voices of Music Therapy or on Twitter at VOMT Podcast. If you have any questions or if you know any innovative music therapist and would like to recommend them for the show, you can email us at voicesofmusictherapy@gmail.com.